Hey guys, it's Voided from 5829, and in this log, I'm going to go over list symmetry and why it's such a good thing to keep in your list. So, symmetry in a list is taking two units or like pairs of units that have the same loadout, same points cost, um, literally the same unit, um, and the point you do that, the reason for that, excuse me, is so that your opponent has to pick one or the other to start shooting at, or split their fire and kill both of them, which isn't going to deal as much damage, and it's going to give you more opportunities to advance with both units. So you want to stay, at least for me, um, this is a disclaimer, this is how I view it. I stay symmetrical as much as possible in my army lists, so that my opponent has to pick and choose their targets, so that I'm not left out in the open with slow foot-slugging models that don't do anything. It's a very helpful tactic in my orcs list, because it makes my opponent have to really knuckle down and decide what they want to do. Because I face them with 3 trucks with the same loadout, all with a 4+ invuln save. So my opponent really has to think hard about their decisions and what they want to shoot at, and just how much they want to shoot at something, at one particular thing. Anyway, so symmetry also doesn't have to be exact loadouts or the exact same unit. It could boil down to units with the same job. So, like, for example, my Mega Knobs, my unit of 3 Mega Knobs in their truck, and my Bike Star, excuse me, are 2 units that I consider symmetrical, because they both have the same job of getting stuck in combat with medium to heavy infantry. Because my bikes have weight of attacks, and my Mega Knobs have weight of attacks and survivability, as well as the power claws. So it all kind of balances out between the two. Plus, they're both at about the same durability, all in all. My bikes have a 4-up invuln save, or a 3+ jink, and toughness 5. My Mega Knobs have a 2+ save and 2 wounds apiece, and they're inside of their truck. And they both have the same speed of max of 24 inches a turn. And so my opponent really has to decide what they're going to spend their points on, like what they're going to spend their shots on. And so it really kind of works out symmetrically for that. But yeah, in a more traditional sense of symmetry, I used to run lists that had 2 of the exact same units, or like I would build halves of an army and then just double it. So I would have an HQ 2 troops, or an HQ 1 troop, and whatever supporting elements I had, and then I would just double that down to the HQ having the same loadout, because I would deploy one of them on each side of the middle line of the table. So my opponent really had to decide if they're going to split their shots between them, concentrate all their fire on one half, etc., etc. And it worked out pretty well for for my chaos, because they had that kind of survivability, and they had, at that point, they had the damage output that my opponent really had to figure out which they wanted to shoot at. And on the flip side of all this, the asymmetrical list, I typically don't like running, because no matter what, you're going to have that one unit. For me, at least, it's generally my warlord and his bodyguards, or a particular vehicle squadron that I really want to cash in on. And so I don't like to use those, because an asymmetrical list will have those units stand out more, and will be a more easily presented and identified target that my opponent will really, really, really want to take out. So if it's a warlord and a bodyguard units, my opponent's going to just throw everything there for warlord kill and whatever, and ignore the rest of my army. And if it's like a vehicle squadron, vehicle squadrons are actually pretty powerful. So my opponent's going to drop everything and try to knock those out too. And some of you might be saying, well, if your opponent shoots at your odd man out unit, that leaves the rest of your army to move forward and advance. And I agree with that. And yeah, that is a good counter argument. It kind of just depends on like how big of a points investment you're going to drop on it. If it's a warlord and his bodyguards, you're going to probably spend a lot of points on it. And so if your opponent sinks other shots into it, you're not going to be using those points, and they're just going to go to waste, and the rest of your army is going to be half-assed. And if the odd man out unit isn't so expensive and isn't really that powerful that you need it to be, your opponent's just going to ignore it, and they're going to start taking out what you do have, and it's just going to be an inefficiency that you could have spent on being more symmetrical to have your opponent give your opponent a headache. And Death Stars are a really good example of an asymmetrical list because they're blobbing up so much stuff into their one big killy unit that the rest of their stuff is just really paltry and easy to kill, relatively speaking. And so that's a case where an asymmetrical list is okay, but that's because they're dropping 1,000 points into it, and so they're maxing out strength, they're maxing out toughness, they're maxing out durability and damage output and psychic powers and all this. It's a big point sink, and that's another reason I don't like Death Stars. I'm getting off topic. So, in conclusion, or in review, I like symmetrical lists because it gives my opponent a headache. They have to choose what they want to hit, and they really have to choose wisely. If with an asymmetrical list, I don't like it because it gives my opponent less of a headache, and it makes something stand out that my opponent is really obviously going to target. And so to newer players out there, I would recommend trying to do a symmetrical list. And again, it doesn't have to be unit per unit. It could be task to task with relatively same durability, speed, and whatnot, to get along with the same shtick. All right, so that's symmetry. I don't really have much else to go on about that. Thank you for listening. And if you're listening to this and you really like your Death Star list or you really like your asymmetrical list, let me know in the comments. I'd really have to know your opinion because, like I said, this is all just experience that I've had. I don't necessarily have the same experience as you do. So let me know if a Death Star or an asymmetrical list really works out for you. Maybe that the bullet magnet tactic really does work out for you against a certain army or in your particular build. I don't know that. So let me know, or let me know if I'm just full of shit. So yeah, this is Voider in 5829, and I'll catch you guys later.